Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering something frightening. The fuel that moves the world has started to disappear. Flights are canceled at airports around the planet. Cargo ships are stuck in ports. Trucks stop on the highways. Gas stations begin to run out. In just a few days, the price of energy skyrockets. This happens across practically every continent. It may sound exaggerated, but energy experts warn about this risk. Oil continues to be one of the foundations of the modern economy. Without it, almost nothing works. Gasoline moves cars, diesel moves trucks and industrial machines. Kerosene keeps airplanes in the air, but the impact of oil goes far beyond transportation. A large part of industry depends directly on energy. Plastics are derived from oil. Fertilizers also depend on energy. Chemical products use petroleum derivatives. Medicines use components produced with fossil energy. Even synthetic clothing depends on this energy chain. This means oil is present in almost everything. Now imagine what happens when it becomes expensive. The first impact appears in transportation. Trucks start spending much more on fuel. Ships face higher operating costs. Airlines increase ticket prices. Quickly, the costs begin to spread. Freight becomes more expensive. Food becomes more expensive. Electronic products become more expensive. Clothes become more expensive. Everything starts to rise. This phenomenon has a name known by economists. Energy inflation. When energy rises, almost all prices rise together. This creates a huge problem for governments and also for central banks, because controlling inflation becomes much more difficult. The traditional response is to raise interest rates. But high interest rates slow down the economy. Companies begin to invest less. Consumers begin to spend less, and economic growth begins to fall. This scenario even has a specific name: stagflation, one of the most difficult economic environments to control. And the problem can be even bigger in some countries, especially those that depend on imported oil. These economies need to buy energy every day. When the price skyrockets, costs explode. Billions of dollars begin to leave the economy. Money that could go to investments, or to infrastructure, or to social programs. But now it needs to pay only for energy. At the same time, the currency may lose value. Inflation may spiral out of control. Companies may reduce production. Some factories may even close. Unemployment may rise. Consumption may fall, and quickly an entire economy can enter a recession. All of this caused by a single factor: energy that is too expensive. That is why oil continues to be watched so closely. It is one of the most important gears of the global economy. While the flow of energy remains stable, the system works. But when the price of oil skyrockets, the impact can cross continents and put entire economies at risk. But there is an even more worrying detail in this story. A large part of the world's oil passes through extremely strategic routes, maritime corridors through which millions of barrels circulate every day. One of the most important is in the Middle East. Between Iran and Oman, there is a corridor called the Strait of Hormuz. This place looks small on the map, but it is one of the most critical points of the global economy. Every day, about 20 million barrels of oil pass through there. This represents approximately 1/5 of all the oil consumed on the planet. In other words, about 20% of the world's energy crosses this corridor. This means billions of dollars in oil passing through there every day. If this route is interrupted, even if only for a few days, the impact on the markets can be immediate. Prices begin to rise quickly. Investors begin to fear shortages, and the market reacts almost instantly. This happens because oil is one of the most sensitive commodities in the world. Any risk of interruption causes fear in the market, and fear in the market makes prices skyrocket. Energy analysts warn that tensions in the Middle East can cause huge shocks in the price of oil. In some extreme scenarios, The barrel could exceed $150. To understand the impact of this, just look at history. In the 70s, an energy crisis caused by cuts in oil production shook the world. The price of the barrel skyrocketed. Gas stations ran out of fuel. Huge lines formed in several countries, and many economies entered recession. Today, the world is even more dependent on energy than it was at that time. Global trade has grown, production chains have become much more complex. Products manufactured in one country use parts produced in several others. A smartphone can have components from 10 different countries. A car can have parts from 3 different continents. All of this depends on constant transportation, and transportation depends on fuel. When oil skyrockets, the cost of these global chains begins to rise quickly. Ships become more expensive to operate. Trucks consume much more fuel. Companies face higher production costs. In some cases, factories begin to reduce production. In other cases, some simply stop. And when that happens, a new problem begins to appear. Shortages. Products begin to disappear from shelves. Delivery times become longer. Companies begin competing for increasingly expensive resources. This type of situation can trigger a chain reaction. First comes the increase in prices. Then comes the economic slowdown. Next, tensions appear in financial markets. Investors begin withdrawing money from markets considered more risky. Currencies of emerging countries can quickly lose value, and governments begin to face difficulties maintaining stable economies. All of this caused by a single factor: energy that is too expensive. That is why every conflict in the Middle East, every threat to strategic maritime routes, and every interruption in oil production are watched so closely by global markets. Because when the flow of energy begins to fail, the impact can cross continents and put entire economies at risk. But there is an even more worrying question. What happens when oil becomes too expensive? And some economies simply cannot afford to pay for that energy, because not all countries produce oil. In fact, many countries depend almost entirely on imports. They need to buy energy in the international market every day. When the price of the barrel skyrockets, the impact appears immediately. Imagine a country that needs to import millions of barrels of oil per day. If the price rises from $70 to $140, energy spending simply doubles. This means billions of extra dollars leaving the economy. Money that could be used for infrastructure, or investments, or social programs, but now it needs to be used only to buy energy. In economics, there is a term for this type of shock. Terms of trade shock. It happens when a country needs to pay much more for an essential resource, and when that happens, the trade balance begins to worsen. More money leaves the country. Less money enters. The currency begins to weaken, and the risk of financial crisis increases. But there is a detail that makes this problem even more dangerous. Oil is traded globally in dollars. This means that when a country's currency loses value, oil becomes even more expensive. The country ends up paying twice. First, because oil prices increased, then because its currency is worth less. This type of situation has already happened several times in history. During energy crises, many countries faced deep recessions. Some even declared debt moratorium. Others saw inflation spiral completely out of control. But the impact does not remain only in the energy sector. When energy becomes too expensive, the entire economy begins to suffer. Factories start operating with much higher costs. Companies reduce production. Some simply close their doors. Unemployment begins to rise. Consumption begins to fall. And quickly, this cycle can push an entire economy into recession. There is also a huge impact on the food sector. A large part of modern agriculture depends on energy. Tractors use diesel. Fertilizers depend on petroleum derivatives. And food transportation depends on fuel. When oil rises a lot, food prices usually rise together, and this can generate enormous social pressure, especially in countries where a large part of income is used only to buy food. At certain moments in history, energy crises have triggered protests, political instability, and even changes in government. That is why oil continues to be watched so closely. It is not just a fuel, it is one of the most important gears of the global economy. While the flow of energy remains stable, the world economy continues functioning. But when this gear begins to fail, the impact can cross continent, affect governments, and completely change the economic balance of the planet. And perhaps this is the most important question of all. If oil prices rise sharply again, how many economies will really be prepared for it? And how many may simply not survive the next energy shock?